Welcome to the Create and Grow podcast. It is an honor to be with you on this beautiful, beautiful day, this launch day. We're all about like rockets, right? Launching into the universe, sending creativity, sending wisdom, sending information about the journey and the evolution of our lived experiences. And today I have a wonderful guest who today's a special day for him, his launch day. I have Mr. Amani Roberts, who is an author, a DJ, a speaker, a global speaker, a professor, and an educator of all. Let's meet him. So, Mr. Roberts is an internationally renowned speaker, author, DJ, awakening hospitality, and in the music professionals creative realm. And he has been doing this for many years as a professional speaker for thousands worldwide. Amani has left an indelible mark on audiences by combining music and nostalgia to reconnect them to their most creative selves. In his new book that is launching today, The Quiet Storm, a historical and cultural analysis of the power, passion, and pain of R&B groups. This book is being launched into the ethos today and hopefully into your hands. You can check it out in the links below. And we are just excited to be here to talk about the book, to really dive into the impetus, the motivation, the impact you wish it to have, and what you're really trying to share. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Janine. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. So I first met you. I was doing a keynote for the Meeting Professionals organization. Oh my goodness! Right when I first started speaking in like 2020, I think.
Yeah.
And always just stay connected with you. You have a warm heart, a gentle spirit, and very knowledgeable in what you do. And of course, the music background. I'm very much aware of people who just have that musical talent and that musical air, and you were certainly one of them. But now we're here for a different reason. We're here for a wonderful launch. And if you can just really give people just a background of how you got to where you are today, like how does someone wake up and they're DJing these massive events and writing and teaching and doing all the things that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's been a interesting journey that hasn't quite been linear. So we'll start went to college, Howard University in DC. My major was hospitality management with a concentration in finance. I ended up working for Marriott Hotels for a long time. But while I was at Howard, I had the pleasure to see DJ Bismarcky spin at a bunch of times. There was one particular notable time when he was at this club called Quigley's in downtown DC, and I saw him spin, and it was amazing. And I said, I want to do what he does when I grow up. But I was scared. I didn't think that DJing was a professional career, so I continued to work for Marriott, traveled around the country, and had various jobs like general manager, director of marketing, regional director of sales and marketing. Mm-hmm. But when I got to LA, I started to teach myself how to DJ. Then I went to Scratch Academy upon the recommendation of one of my closest friends in life. I went through that whole curriculum, which is like getting your master's degree in DJing. And I went back, got the second program, which was music production. And then I started to DJ and grow my business along the way because I was volunteering with Meeting Professionals International, Southern California chapter. That's how I got connected to Cal State University, Fullerton. And I worked with them on some volunteer events. Then they were like, we have an open professor position. Would you be interested? Adjunct? I said, sure, even though I never taught before. That continued to grow. I ended up creating a class at the university for music business. I went to Berklee College of Music and got my master's degree in music business. And then in April of 2020, I released my first book, DJs Mean Business. And then because I went to grad school, Berklee, my thesis was on why there are no longer any Black R&B groups in existence. And so I did that project. And then after I graduated, I continued to do the research, finding out or discovering pretty much 99.5% of all R&B groups are Black anyways. So I just broadened the topic to R&B groups, wrote the book, and here we are 4.5 years later on launch day.
Oh, wow. So much there I want to talk about. A lot of times I work with, I do a lot of corporate training now with adults, but I started my career teaching elementary school and then ran a nonprofit for teenagers. And I would tell them, you're writing all these essays and all these papers, and the professor grades them, and then they go into a drawer. Like, have you ever thought about publishing your essays and doing something else with them? And it seems like that's what you did, correct?
Yeah, I took my thesis and made it into a book and did more research and came up with the creative and the pictures and the design and
Mhm.
a little DJ touch in there because I mentioned my favorite songs, my favorite samples. So I kind of made it as an immersive experience as possible.
Yes, I love that. And I love the song lists and how
Yeah.
the songs ranked. And even your little avatar
Yeah.
is
You like my little
there.
avatar? Yeah.
Yes. And so another aspect, in the 8th grade, I tried my hand at DJing. My middle school had their like lunch parties, and I was up there trying to put in cassette tapes and take out cassette
Yeah.
tapes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I always wanted to DJ too. I just never got around to it, so I can live vicariously through you.
Okay.
And before we get into the book and a lot of that, as you know, and hopefully we're looking to work together as we launch our Lyrics and Leadership Institute, that
Mhm.
music is very powerful. And the one thing that I love about DJing is you have to be ultra sensitive to the energy in the room and the energy of people, the energy of where you wanting everything to go. Can you talk more about that? Like, how were you just born with that, or did you train that up? What does that look like?
Yeah, I call that like reading the room. You got to be able to read the room and be able to take the people that are in the room on a journey. And I definitely wasn't born with it. I think I acquired my wisdom through experience because once you have a dance floor that's packed, that's a great thing. But
Mhm.
then every time, once you have a dance floor that's packed, very frequently you will clear the dance floor unintentionally. So therefore, therefore you understand and you learn what songs work, what songs don't work, what songs you need to go to if you need to get people to the dance floor, how to maybe sandwich two songs in. Like if you play a popular song, you want to see if this newer song might work or whatever. So you sneak it in the middle, but then you have another song to follow on the back end that's popular that will keep people there. And so it's just a lot of practice. I DJed a lot of clubs and bars. So I was able to practice and learn on the fly. I think that's the best way, is learning on the fly in person, because no two crowds are ever the same. No
Mm.
two crowds are ever the same. So you're always practicing. It can be very humbling, but as long as you kind of don't take it personal and just practice and keep at it, you'll eventually learn the skill. And it's like a muscle you always have to kind of exercise and work, because as songs evolve, as moods evolve, things change. For example, you used to be able to play Kanye all the time. Now, maybe not, maybe you used to be able to play Drake all the time. Now, maybe not. So you have to kind of evolve with the times.
That is a good point, that you have to be not just aware of the room that changes from event to event, aware of the people, aware of demographics, right? Because you're going to have a different introduction if you're doing a quinceañera, or if you're doing a 50th wedding anniversary,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
In the Latino community, or in the African American community, or a mixed, diverse community, right? You have people from all over. Like, you're taking in this data like in real time,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So what might work at a quinceañera, Bad Bunny, might not work at a 50th anniversary. You might have to play some Luis Miguel. So it just depends. Or some La Vida es la Carnaval, Celia Cruz. So you got to be able to dig and pick and choose and know, maybe
Yes.
some Mark Anthony. So I'm just shot, this is what I would go to if I was in my Latin American bag.
Mhm. Yes, yes. And a lot of our work talks about cultural competence, right? And intercultural creativity, and how cultural competence actually affects creative thinking. Do you feel that your ability to give us a wonderful service, but such a what's the word, intimate service, like music is very intimate with people, very personal, that's what I'm trying
Mhm.
to say.
Yeah.
So you're giving a very personal service, and then you have to do this with several types of groups, all the time. Do you think that's helped in your creative thinking in non-arts areas?
Absolutely. And you're the first person to ask that, but absolutely because I've been able to experience different types of events through different demographics of people, that has helped me in the business world too, because whether it be Asian music in the Asian community, Latin American, African American, or the general population, like there are different songs that work for different demographics, but then you also get to learn about the cultures as well. And, we learn through osmosis. So you're just learning as soaking it in. That's helped me personally and professionally.
Yeah, that's good. And it's so important to know that that's a skill, right? And now great leaders so how has DJing and the music aspect helped in your leadership skills in other arenas? Because you're an author, making these negotiations, you're a professor, you're a businessman, right? You're an entrepreneur as well. How has DJing helped you in these other spheres?
I think DJing has helped me learn how to take feedback better, because you'll get feedback both directly if the client is not happy with what you're playing, and then you have to adjust on the fly. But you'll also get maybe indirect feedback, whereas you see what's going on with the audience, how they're reacting to the songs you're playing. So feedback, it's also helped me maybe kind of manage, your ego, because your ego can get in the way sometimes. But if you're open to feedback and you're open to experiencing new things, that will help you. And I think that's the main thing that DJing has helped me in terms of with business. In addition, just continue to confirm the importance of networking, building relationships, because I have some clients I've had for numerous years. And I think that networking is kind of taken for granted nowadays, particularly with our younger generation. And so it's taught me that DJing, just the power of sticking with it and resilience, because I went to DJ school. I didn't pass my final class the first time I went through. I missed passing it by 2 points. And so that was a pivotal point in my career. Had to go back, take the classes again, where there's no guarantee that you'll pass, because it's all subjective, it's all performance based. So just the power of resilience and not, quote unquote, taking my ball and going home. So those would be the 3 kind of top lessons that I've learned that I can apply to my profession through DJing.
And if you look at the list out for 2025 of the World Economic Forum, they're saying everything you listed, right? That agility, that ability to socially influence, feedback, and the ability to quickly adapt and modify and keep going. Everything you listed, you got from your musical exposure. And I never really thought about that in-time feedback. That real-time feedback is crucial, especially for leaders nowadays, to be able to keep getting it and then keep going forward as you're getting feedback.
Yes. Don't let it stop you and set you back. Exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And before we jump into your book, you and I have been talking for the past few months. I've shared with you our lyrics and leadership vision and our initial artist of using Prince. And I also call him Dr. Prince Rogers Nelson, because he earned an honorary doctorate from the University of Minnesota. And what are your thoughts about why do you think it's a good idea to use Prince to launch teaching people leadership skills and brain health skills?
I think Prince was a rare human being, obviously for his music skills, but his business savvy. You look back when he changed his name because he had his conflict with his record label. He was 35 years ahead of what we're kind of seeing now, where artists are not happy with the label, not owning their work. He was very vocal, very smart. He spoke about it. He shared his experience. So I think business-wise, extremely savvy. Like, he laid the groundwork for an artist like a Taylor Swift to go and re-record her music and have people and her fans say, you need to stream Taylor's version. He laid the groundwork for that 35 years ago. So that's number one. Second, he was fearless with his lyrics and his music. Fearless. Like, some of the lyrics he had, even some of the more, dirty lyrics, I mean, he was fearless in terms of what he said, but even some of the simple ones, as I shared with you in one of my favorite Prince songs, and we talked about this in my music business class yesterday, I have them list their favorite lyrics. I shared them, if I was your girlfriend, would you run to me if someone hurt you, even if that someone was me? Like, that you could write a whole book on that. That's one lyric right there. So that lyrics, and just, and then even like Sinead O'Connor, Nothing Compares to You. That's a Prince song. And just, it's been the way he wrote that song. How come you don't call me anymore? So just the way he was fearless, direct, subtle, emotional, all in one with his lyrics and everything. He captured so many emotions with just one or two lines. She's always in my hair. Like, oh my gosh, like he said that, but then the lyrics that cover that, just brilliance. So that's kind of my opinion, and that's why I think he's a perfect choice, because we can go through the crates with his music, analyze his lyrics, and we could have a good time.
Yes, yes, and I so thank you for that, and that's why I was another reason why I was gravitating towards you as we build this, and definitely see you as a voice, and hopefully a guest, or
Yeah.
a guest facilitator, or an actual facilitator as you continue to write your books. It's one of my dreams to maybe even write a book called The Prismatic Leadership of Prince, of Dr. Prince. What does that look like? Because he was a prismatic leader. So we will definitely have more conversations about that in the future. But we are here on the launch day, right? It's all about launching ideas into the world. I think that's a big reason why we humans are here. If not, we can just be birds or cats or something. But we're humans with these beautiful brains, right? I have mine here.
Okay.
Yes. As we talk about music and the brain, and why the arts are so important. But really, R&B, R&B, and we look at these other genres that are highly connected to it. I was born in 79, so they call them the bump years as far as the brain, what the brain first remembers, those like late, you're 10 to about 18, 19. Those are your bump years that your brain will hold on to. And if people are dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's, if you play music from those bump years, it just makes a lot of people come alive, right? So mine was Boys to Men, TLC, 808, boom, like an 808, and all that. But you really took this book and took us on a journey, even before some people that I reading your book, I wasn't even aware of. I'm like, who are these people? I know these, and of course the Supremes and the big names. But start us on your journey of how did R&B really have its birth?
Ooh. So how did R&B? I think R&B had its birth because it's like it came from blues. So the blues was first, and then you had R&B that was kind of birthed through the blues. And at first it started as like doo-wop groups singing on the corner, harmonizing, and then eventually the groups progressed to get into the studio and to make more music, and from there it just continued to grow. And I think that when you take R&B music, you think of the blues, you think of doo-wop, but then you go to the 60s and we had a lot of things going on in the world. And so R&B sort of made, the soundtrack. There were many, many songs in there, like Parliament, Funkadelic. They had a lot of songs that were related to what's going on in the world right now. And there were anthems that were sung that really were synonymous with the times. And so, R&B started to really become a vehicle for people to express themselves in terms of what was going on, whether it be the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, all the things. And then you progress to the 70s. In the 70s, the wars had subsided, and then people were kind of, R&B music kind of stayed above the disco era. Disco had a brief journey, but R&B music was still there. Groups like the Temptations, the Four Tops, the OJs kind of dominated the 70s, the Jackson 5. And then as you continue to go through, you get to the 80s. The 80s was an interesting time because I think the strength of the 70s groups carried over to the 80s. Then the 80s, you have like the New Editions, you have Atlantic Star, Cameo. And so, it was like a little lull. And then the 90s, as I think, was like the golden era of R&B groups. Like you mentioned TLC,
I agree.
Boyz II Men, we have Jodeci, you have SWV, you have Blackstreet. I mean, all these groups, In Vogue, all these groups that were dominating the charts. And when I say the charts, I'm talking about the Billboard Hot 100 charts that had every genre in it. And these groups were at the top consistently. And then you get to the 2000s and it kind of petered off after Destiny's Child went their separate ways. So that's kind of my definition of R&B. And I think when you think of R&B music, it's like a movement of feeling, passion, and pain all in one that's expressed through the lyrics, the dancing, the videos, the choreography. It's a very unique genre. But I think that, when you talk, that's why I have passion and pain in the title, because R&B groups, we know them, they're singing in the rain, they're upset because their significant other, their man or their woman left them, and they have no problem singing about it. And that's painful, but then they have such passion because they keep singing about it. So that's a long definition to kind of the birth, where it came from, what it means, all the things.
But there's a lot there, my brain's always, because I'm so into the Prince research, so my brain's always kind of making that connection. But a lot of people in my interview said he provided the soundtrack of our life. And when I think about TLC and En Vogue, I'm so glad you brought them up. This is like, me being, especially an African-American woman and coming into my adulthood, right, and trying to find myself, it's like, how much does the music help shape identity? They talked about the show A Different World, and how just putting A Different World on the TV, just African Americans and even in other cultures, just the applications to colleges in general, but especially HBCUs, skyrocket, right? That how does media affect populations, right? So what are your thoughts with that, about how the R&B group, especially of the 90s, where you saw that huge presence on the mainstream list, how did it affect our identity as a cultural group? And I know we're all different, we're not a monolith, but within our demographics.
I think the groups really gave us an option to see people that look like us sing about things that maybe we were feeling but afraid to talk about. Also experience some success and some wins, also some lows. Like TLC, it's one of only 2 female groups based in the US that ever got diamond status, which is 10 million records or sold. They also went bankrupt. So some very, very, important lessons that were learned in public. Like, this was public, people knew. And I think that then you see people like New Edition, which brings you Belle Biv DeVoe, but then Michael Bivins discovers Boyz II Men. So you can see the line of how these groups just keep coming and growing. And so you could just see reinvention, which is a topic I talk about a lot. Like, I love the New Edition example, because from New Edition came Belle Biv DeVoe. And they actually had more commercial success, relatively speaking, for 2 albums than New Edition. And so you see that. And then you mentioned media. So I wanted to kind of talk about media, because when we were growing up, I was born a little before you, we had like Ebony, Essence, Jet Magazine. Yeah, Vibe Magazine. Now, I won't lie, I gotta be honest with you. Jet Magazine, I would always flip to the Beauty of the Week first.
I know.
Gotta be honest.
A lot of you did.
Yes. So, however, those were the primary earned media sources for R&B groups. You'd see them on the cover. You see articles about them. They would be consistently mentioned. At their peak, they had over 8 million monthly subscribers to these media properties. Then as the recession happened, things shifted in the mid to late 2000s. They all and digital became very popular. The subscriptions declined to less than 600,000. That was one of the main reasons that really hurt R&B groups, because they couldn't get the same amount of promotion and media on other platforms, other magazines, things like that. So media played an important role, because Ebony Magazine goes back to the mid 50s. These magazines had tradition and longstanding documentation of what was going on in the music industry in the world, but particularly for R&B groups. So when you say media, that's always an interesting fact that people don't really consider about its impact with R&B groups too.
That's good. That's good, because it's like everything is interconnected. And we don't see that if you're not really paying attention and standing back, and which is another reason why I believe arts education is so critical for every human, but especially for those in leadership, because it gives you that reminder to stand back and to see how things that don't look normally connected are connected, and what's influencing what, whether seen or unseen. And so that's something that I just learned. Thank you so much. And just, and so going back to the identity formation of a culture of, groups of people of generation, basically. And you did mention TLC, and I'll also bring up Toni Braxton, because I heard someone say the music business sometimes is more about the business than the music.
Yeah, it is. Whoever said that is exactly right. Yes.
And I was just like, because we're on the music side, the consumer side. So we're like, that's my jam, or it's nostalgia, and we can talk more about that and listening to music that you love and brain health and all that good stuff. But my very first book is about financial literacy, right? And how I feel as just a generation, we weren't taught anything in the schools, right? And we, if the parents did not teach you directly, then you just kind of flew by the seat of your pants. And then we're getting, hit with all this advertisement. But you're looking at it also from the music business aspect, right? And being taken advantage of. I remember Prince was on getting an award and he was just like, don't think they're for you. These big record labels, because they may not be for you. And be careful of contracts. And so what if you can dive deeper into that about the story of TLC and of Toni Braxton, because she's probably a part of that era as well, right? And was that a microcosm of how things were culturally?
Well, so TLC, first of all, if I were to write another book, I'd love to write a book about TLC, get their whole story out there because it needs to be told. They've had a tremendous impact on culture, business, like everything, all the things. When you look at them, they had just several issues that they probably were unaware of, which is why I'm so passionate about helping people in the music business just make better business decisions, because most of the time it's just like you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And so the first thing is that they didn't own the rights to their name. I think that was owned by like Pebbles, so Pebbles artists, one of the ones who sort of discovered them, so they didn't own the rights to their name. Second, they really wanted to get songwriting credit on a lot of the music as they started to create their music, because songwriting credit and owning some of the publishing, that's the long money. That's the money that's going to carry you for years to come. Because if you own some of your publishing, if your songs are ever in a TV show, a movie, a video game, a commercial, you get paid. And some of that money saves artists. Plus, right now you see a lot of artists are selling their catalogs for a substantial amount of money. And if you don't own your publishing, or you don't know about the value of catalogs and holding on to your publishing, you don't get this money. So that's one thing. Then many artists, especially back in the day, all they wanted to do was get their song on the radio. If I get my song on the radio, I've made it. They didn't realize that in the US, the artists don't get compensated if your song is on the radio. The songwriters do, and whomever owns the publishing. So particularly early on, there were many issues. First, like artists would never get songwriting credit. They would just be singing songs that were written for them. Even further back in the day, they might sing some songs and be the artist, but they would put a white artist on the cover of the track. I mean, that's a whole different subject that happened, but they were just passing up and missing out on money. Then you have, like, I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain it. Like, you have the songwriting, the publishing, but many artists just, if I was to tell you the two most common reasons why groups broke up, because almost all the time, many groups break up, it was because of money issues and drugs. Money issues and drugs. Wow. And so it's just the lack of knowledge, the people being taken advantage of by record labels, managers. So the TLC example, I wish that we would have been able to share lessons that were learned before they got to be big, so they could have heeded those lessons and done better. Because what happened to them was happening in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So that's kind of my answer to that. Toni Braxton, I don't know a lot about her specifics, but I'm sure it's very similar to the issues I just covered and just mentioned in terms of songwriting credit, owning your publishing, and just really, really knowing that if I want to be long lasting and not have to go on tour every year, I need to have some publishing. So when my songs are being placed, because think about all these shows that we see on all these networks now that are using the music. If you own your publishing, you're going to get paid over and over again for the song being used. And so that's something I try to teach my students right away. And you talk to music business experts, not me, who they always say that owning the publishing is something that people never understand, but need to learn as soon as possible.
Soon as possible. And it reminds me of another Prince-ism. If you don't own your masters, the master owns you, or something. And that can go, because my job is to hear people's stories and then connect it to creative thinking. you know,
Yeah.
and hear people's narrative and see the diamonds of creativity that they may not even see. And so when I think about this, I think about intercultural creativity or neurosomatic creativity or even lyrics and leadership. When I have an idea, I just am like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's start making these things and put it out there. I call Adam Diamond, right? His last name actually means diamond, which is my logo. So I was like, it's meant to be. And I call him and or email him and I'm like, hey, I have this idea. Intercultural creativity, is it trademarkable? Can I trademark? Can I get the rights to own this term, right?
Yeah.
And I trademark intercultural creativity, neurosomatic creativity, and but we're not taught that, right? But the
Right.
fact that I went to a CSUN, you know, California State University event, and he was on the panel, and so was I just got to talking to him, and he's like, oh, and he came to speak to my teenagers and talked about trademarks,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm trying to do what you're trying to do, get this to the youth as soon as possible,
Yeah.
because it's not just with songs, it's with creative ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
that's what you're looking at. What are the creative productions of these
Mhm.
groups and their brand, right? And their narrative. And
Yeah.
this is a part of their narrative. Yeah, and you're right. If TLC would have had this told to them or at least seen the stories like Sam Cooke, right? Do you know anything about Sam Cooke? And
Not much, but tell me what are you referring to? Like,
I think it was Sam Cooke or just, but he kind of had the same thing with Prince. He was kind of being vocal about just the ownerships and other bands that were a little bit before Prince. I just heard one of the older men say it was an honor watching Prince do what he did because they wish they would have known that when they were
exactly,
coming
exactly my
into
point.
it, because they
Yeah.
were just focused on the music. I just want to play. Just
Oh,
can I just play a song and not
no.
focus on the business because we weren't taught that. So
I- Just what you said. The music business is called the music business for a reason.
for a reason. And I love that. So that bridge to the listeners, even if you're not a musician, even if you're not trying to cut an album, look at your own life and say, okay, where are my ideas coming from? And am I able to own the idea? Like, what does that look like to have ownership of my creative thinking? Because a lot of people are going to jobs and you know, there's a lot of layoffs happening, right? A lot of people are going to jobs and they're getting laid off. They're like, wait, I gave 40 years to this company. Now I have nothing.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, luckily for me, I worked for almost 20 years for Marriott and I walked away, but I had some good things happening. I was able to learn and acquire
Mhm,
and network, but you got to learn, you got to own your intellectual property, be very
mhm,
careful about sharing it with, especially these big companies, and just be knowledgeable. Just be knowledgeable about trademarks, copyright. I mean, the core of the copyright law that really kind of manages and operates in the music industry is from 1908. The core, the 1908. Like that's when Harriet Tubman was alive, you know? And so it hasn't been changed. There's been addendums and other things, but the core of the copyright law is based in 1908. I mean, streaming wasn't around then. CDs weren't
wow.
around then. Vinyl wasn't
Mhm.
around then. So of course, I know people will say, "Oh, there have been changes," but the core of the law is still based in the Copyright Act of 1908.
Harriet Tubman. I was like, wait, what? Yeah, she died in 1913. Wow. They that is very striking.
Yeah.
Wow. And so looking at just these stories, what is a group that you investigated for this book that really surprised you that you may not have known of, but you found throughout your research?
Ooh, I love the story of the Whispers. The
The
Whispers is one of my favorite stories because their first single came out in 1964. 1964. They didn't crack the Billboard Top 20 until 1979. Then they didn't get a top 10 hit until 1987. So for them, when you think of resilience, it took them 23 years to get there. And when you think about the beauty of collaborating with others, it was only when they collaborated with Babyface and L.A. Reid that they created the classic song Rock Steady and got into the top 10. And so I just love the story of resilience. And they talk about how they just had to continue to put their work in. It was just fascinating. And they're still around now. They're still doing well. They experienced a nice resurgence when Will Smith sampled their song And the Beat Goes On for Miami, Welcome to Miami. And so they're one of my favorite stories. Another story that comes up is the group you like, In Vogue. I didn't realize they never had a #1 Billboard Hot 100 hit.
Oh,
Never.
wow.
And they were like a legendary group, could sing.
Mhm.
And they're one I get sad with, because if they could have stayed together for a little longer, they could have been even bigger. They were phenomenal. I think that when you remember the song Hold On and how it began with that a cappella harmonization, like
When I
had you, yes. That's legendary. So that's another group, just researching them. The Jacksons never won a Grammy. Another thing that was just shocking to learn and everything.
Really?
And they had never won a Grammy, and they had issues with their record label, so they switched over and things. So even we love the Jacksons, but that's why they had to go from the Jackson 5 to the Jacksons, whatever. That's why they changed their name, because they switched the record label. Didn't know that.
And they didn't own the Jackson 5.
Right. No.
You know what scene comes to mind every time you say that? Tina Turner. He was like, my name. I want to keep my name. And Ike was like, that has my daddy's blood on it. She was like, nope, I worked too hard for my name. And that really made me think as a young child when I watched that film. It was like, wow, that's a thing, to own the stage name. I never really thought about that.
She knew. So those are just a couple stories. I mean, I'm a big SWV fan, so just researching them more was good.
Well, I love SWV, SSWWUV. What was any gems that you got from their story, if you can remember?
Their gems, I'm trying to think about. For them, they of course they broke up, whatever, and they've reunited. Just how they were discovered. They came from the church. I think some of their lead singers came from the church or whatever, which is very common for R&B groups. Just how they were all put together and they did well. But even them, like Human Nature, one of the best remixes, it's debated, one of the best remixes of all time. They're right here, Human Nature remix. I don't think that got to #1 either on the charts. So it's just so interesting how we love these songs. And then Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers was an interesting one, because this was back in the 50s, 60s. When they went to perform, I got to remember the name of the show. There was a show they went to perform on where they told the audience, who was all white, they said, you may not dance when they're singing. The audience kind of revolted and danced. Frankie Lyman ended up dancing with a white female. That show was canceled within 3 weeks. And so it was just really interesting. And they were young too. Frankie Lyman teenagers were young. So it's just learning the history, seeing what's going on, the evolution. Those are some of my favorite stories that I just uncovered while researching. I love the Isley Brothers. I'll end with them. They're the only group in history that's had a hit in 6 straight decades. The 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. They had a Billboard Hot 100 hit in 6 straight decades. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's talked about enough. I think that they should be given more credit for their contributions to music. And so I just love learning about that group, how they formed, and they still perform, and they're still good.
And do you think that you should put in a petition to who's the big award, like the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, or is that like the pinnacle?
Pretty much, yeah. That's like the Grammys is the thing. So Lifetime Achievement would work, but I wish they would get the Grammys for their work. Like, we don't need to give them an award retroactively. Like, they should be awarded for their work. Yes, but that would work. I'm sure they would be happy or whatever.
Yes. Well, sometimes it takes someone to gather the data to see what other people are missing, because other people are just in real time. But once again, because you are a creative thinker, to take that step back and to look where patterns are. And when I taught elementary school, because I was always so big on, if I have to teach history, let's look at history through the arts, through the paintings, through the music, through the theater. Let's look at this concept through the arts. So I would always have this huge book, and I'm so upset that I don't have it, and I forgot even the title. But you can look up the year, and it shows you everything that was popular in all of the arts, from all the way to like the 1300s to now, right? And now you've done that within the R&B genre through the years. You started in which decade again?
1950s.
1950s, and all the way up to
2000. 2000s. Because after after Destiny's Child kind of went their own way, that was a wrap.
Interesting. Interesting. Wow. And because like who rose in their place? Because even the boy bands of NSYNC and Backstreet Boys were kind of coming down by then.
Yeah.
Was it just
So
like the solo acts?
basically, like I talk about that, like the way the consumption differed is like, the introduction of YouTube.
Mhm.
And, if you sing it in front of a camera, it became very singular. Then we went through the recession, the music recession, like 2008 to 2013. So record labels are trying to save money. So they recognized that first, if we work with hip hop groups, they're cheaper to manage. You don't need background music. You don't need to do makeup, things like that. So hip hop was a more affordable option. I have some more research to do about why couldn't they keep both. I think there's a story underneath that, but they really just promoted. So hip hop took over. Then EDM music also kind of became really big, because when you look back to the mid 2010s, we had our stars like Neo, Usher, and Rihanna. They were doing EDM tracks, up tempo, 120 beats per minute or more. They shifted instead of what they started with. Now they've kind of come back, whatever, but that was really big then. And then really, that was a big issue. EDM, hip hop, the recession, because 54% of mom and pop record stores closed during the big music recession.
Yeah.
45% of the big box stores, you remember the Tower Records, the
Yeah.
Best Buy, things like that. You go to, watch music, because it would always be Saturday mornings when you would get up and you go to the record store to see the groups do the meet and greets and the signings and everything. Music used to always come out on Tuesdays. So they would do things leading to their new album releases. So that all shifted. And then I really think the final nail in the coffin, or what really is not talked about, is you had the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And that was supposed to diversify radio. But what happened is that you had Cumulus Media, iHeartMedia, and Town Square Media bought up all the radio stations around the US. And then they went to a more playlist format. So if I'm in Phoenix, or I'm in DC, or I'm in Boston, or I'm in Atlanta, generally speaking, you're going to hear the same songs on the radio, because they all went to playlist format and syndication.
Mm-hmm.
Save money, because when you look at those board of directors, they're not very diverse. So they didn't understand. They didn't really care. They were beholden to the advertisers. And so by going to playlisting formatted, you really kind of restricted local acts to really start to get big. Because if you think about it, Boyz II Men got big in Philadelphia first. TLC got really big in Atlanta first. Shy, they were on DC home jams from Howard in DC. Destiny's Child was big in Houston first.
Texas, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Houston, but when you go to playlisting format, it takes away the local element, and groups have a harder time breaking out because it's hard to get on the radio. So that was just a whole other reason. So yeah.
Once again, everything's connected to everything. And if you don't have that keen eye like you do, you may be oblivious to the effects, right? The domino effects.
Yeah.
That's so good, because it shifts the narrative, right? It shifts the advancement of some who can't break through. Wow. Oh my goodness. This is so wonderful. So yeah, so with that, your book, what's one main thing that you want people to really get away from your book?
Oh, I would say just to learn about some new groups who you might have heard about but didn't really know. So for example, a lot of people are really big, like, hip hop fans, Notorious B.I.G. They don't remember that he sampled some famous DeBarge songs. And so maybe you didn't know about DeBarge, but now that you know that he samples the songs, read about them, learn about them, how talented they were. So I would love for people to learn about some new groups that maybe they weren't aware of, that they were listening to their music or samples of the music and had no idea. That would make me happy.
And that's the beauty of creative thinking, right? You're being exposed to other influences, right? And that's one thing about knowing the history of things, is you're saying phrases or you're listening to music, not knowing that there was a whole journey for it to get to you in this point in time. And great leaders and great creative thinkers are aware to do some investigation on the journey, even words. When I do my teachings, I'm always about the etymology of this word is this, and here's what it means in the Greek and the Hebrew and the French, or the Latin. I want people to know that words are on a journey as well. and they carry the story of the people. Language carries the story of the people. And as you've shown us today, music carries the story of the people. And this is for all people, all Americans, all around the world, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, R&B groups were extremely popular in Europe, extremely popular. Some groups chose to live there because they were more popular there than in the US. So this is a worldwide movement, I like to call, but our R&B music touches countless cultures and countries.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We do end our podcast with with a gem, and because we believe that everyone is a diamond, everyone's meant to shine bright, and we also believe in celebrating prismatic leaders, right? Like Prince and yourself, people who are able to see the nuanced colors within concepts or within people and let those colors shine bright. And so, what is a gem that you would like to leave your audience, in addition to the other thing that you wanted to know about their book or your book? But what do you want to leave, like a point of wisdom for us?
Point of wisdom. I would just like to tap into the power of resilience. That's why I love to share the whisper story, because many times people will give up when they're on like the 1 yard line. And so I love to show different stories from different groups that just continue to proceed. And right when they're about to give up, they hit it big. And so my gem would be just it's very cliche, but use the stories of resilience that you hear about in the book, the groups in the book, to inspire you to not give up, just keep moving forward, and to just keep pushing forward, because it'll happen for you. And we have evidence in the past. So let's kind of use the history to our advantage.
Beautifully said. Resilience, which is on the list of the World Economic Forum list of skills needed for 2025 and beyond. Skills needed, period, since the beginning of time, right? We wouldn't be here if our ancestors weren't resilient, right?
Amen.
But thank you for showing us that in a new facet, though. That's the beauty of this conversation and of your work. And we hope to see you continue to share more, continue to write more, seeing what you're going to produce, and through musically, through your academics. And of course, we're still talking about you being a part of the Lyrics and Leadership Institute and sharing there, as well as we gain our student base and people who are just looking to learn more creativity skills, brain health skills, resilience skills through the work of the artists they already know and love. And who knows, maybe one day we can get an artist that you have written about to be a featured artist that the world can learn multiple things from in multiple ways. So we thank you so much. Thank you, audience, for joining us. And we'll see you at our next Create and Grow. Don't forget to shine bright and go listen to your favorite R&B song today. Talk to you later.